Hi everybody, Beth here from Access Paranormal, coming to you live from London for PIVC 2020. It's been a great day so far and I've got such great feedback from everybody and I'm really enjoying it. I know a lot of people are enjoying it as well. I'm getting lots of great information. And my next guest is no word of a lie, equally going to add so much more fabulous knowledge with regards to investigating possible paranormal phenomena. Now, this gentleman is one of the world's foremost ghost box users. Tim Woolworth has been featured using ghost boxes on NBC's First Look, NPR, the Detroit NBC News, dozens of radio broadcasts, and the television show CNY Spirits. With years of experience in EVPs from his own research, which stemmed from living in a haunted house. In today's session, Tim shares about the history of EVPs and advice on how you can get the best out of your EVP sessions. And I'm just going to put this presentation up and you're going to sit back and soak up the knowledge. And excellent. Was. Okay, everybody. I know we're having some interesting audio issues with that particular one. It's a great presentation, but I think we're going to have to bring the man himself on board to actually talk a bit more about the information that you're seeing up there. Of course, for me, I could see absolutely everything and hear everything, and I was enthralled by it and sort of engrossed in it, not realizing that you guys couldn't, which is half the reason why we're here. So I'm about to bring on the lovely Tim himself. And yeah, let's talk to the man himself and pick his brain and yeah, move through it. So again, yeah, poltergeist interfering with it, of course that's what it would be. So I'm going to bring in this lovely man. Hello.
Howdy, howdy. And that sounded really interesting audio-wise. I don't know what's going on, but it was something special.
Yeah, poltergeist activity is right to go. My goodness, so welcome. Even though good old tech issues, you're gonna love that.
Oh, absolutely. But you know, this is the first time I've done any form of online conference, and so far it's been going great. Just a couple little kinks to work out. So I don't know how you want to proceed. Is it possible for me to just share the PowerPoint and talk over it on the screen? Let's do that perfectly. Then.
Cool, awesome. Right. So you'll see there's a share screen button at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
If you click on that, it should give you the option to either pick a file.
Application window, here we go.
Awesome.
All right, can everybody see that?
Hey, here we go.
All right, as long as you can see it and hear it, I'll try to roll through this as quick as possible because of the issues. But today the topic is EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. We're going to be exploring it from a historical perspective and adding in some theory at the end as to how EVP is formulated. But first, we need to basically mention what EVP is. As most of the people watching this know right now, EVP is electronic voice phenomenon. It's basically defined as an anomalous voice that will find a way to imprint itself upon your recording media. This can be your reel-to-reel tapes, your cassette tapes, your digital recorders if you're out in the field. And we're also getting EVP from technology, like software applications, Ghostbox, and hardware boxes like Obelisk or EVP Maker. And EVP, most importantly, is a form of instrumental transcommunication. A lot of people don't realize that fact. EVP falls under the umbrella of ITC. And one thing I would love to stress is that disembodied voices are not EVP. So if you're on an investigation and you're asking a question of the other side, and a voice manifests in the room on its own, and you hear it with your ears, that's a disembodied voice that is not considered an EVP. On your screen, you're going to know a few different researchers of EVP. A couple of them you may be familiar with, most of them you probably won't be. There are dozens more researchers who have influenced the field, but these few people that I'm bringing to you right now are the ones that we're going to focus on today because they're the ones who made the strides in the field that are being used today. First, we're going to talk about WALDEMAR BORGORAS. He was an anthropologist who was at the Petersburg Academy of Sciences. As an anthropologist, he studied cultures, and he wanted to be the first anthropologist to travel to Siberia and study the Chukchi shamanic tribe. They had a ritual where they would invoke spirits, and made them manifest, and they were well known for this. So he traveled in 1901 to Siberia and published his results in 1904 in his book called The Chukchi. When he went to Siberia, he brought with him a singular piece of equipment outside of his pen and paper, an Edison phonograph. What he wrote on the shamans was that they were recognized by their eyes. They could see spirits even in the dark. It was the brightness of their eyes that let people know that they were shaman, because if they could see the spirit, they could communicate with them, they could invoke them. Absolutely fascinating way of looking at it. If we look at other shamanic cultures, sometimes the shaman are known for their madness, their hallucinations, and other features for speaking to the gods. And he said he was able to record his EVP. There was a 20-foot tent, and BORGORAS was in one corner. The shaman was in a directly opposite corner. In the middle of the room was the Edison phonograph that he brought with him. The shaman went into a drumming trance, and voices in English and Russian filled the room. More importantly, a spirit manifested and spoke directly into the horn of the Edison phonograph.
I think it appears that we can't even hear any audio. Which might be a bit of a pain, because that's one of the best recordings ever.
Now, what's interesting is when you listen to that, you hear that really slight drumming in the background. That is 10 feet away where the shaman was in the opposite corner of the room. And after this spirit appeared, yelling, turn around, turn around, turn around, and laughing and have this angsty, howling, growling type thing, a wolf appeared. So that's the drummer in the background that you're hearing.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're hearing anything. That's the only problem. I don't think any audio is actually coming through.
Oh, it's not transferring the audio over?
No, which is in pain, because that's the whole topic is about sound.
Oh, man. Well, we'll skip that then. But I will load up the original video that I sent to Beth so you can hear all of these sounds, and I'll put it on my YouTube, and I'll give it, and Beth can probably load it on her YouTube channel as well. So we're going to have to skip through a lot of these EVPs. Oh, well, life goes on, folks. No big deal. But anyway, what the EVP was saying is there's a man screaming into the horn and is saying, turn around, turn around, turn around, turn around, turn around. Now, if you look at the Edison phonograph, right behind the horn, you see a wax wheel. That wax wheel would spin around and around and around and around, and it would imprint audio upon the wheel itself. The interesting part about this is that you had non-native English speakers receiving EVP in English, which is absolutely fascinating. And I often wonder if it's because the piece of equipment that was being brought was made in America. I have no reason, no possible proof to support that, but it's the only thing that makes sense at this point in time. But the Edison phonograph came from a man named Thomas Edison. I'm sure everyone here has heard of Thomas Edison. He had over 2,300 patents in his life. He was a bona fide genius. And most people don't know that Thomas Edison was also a spiritualist. This part of his history has been pushed to the back because of his family, and we'll get to that in a little bit. As a spiritualist, he often attended a place called Lilydale, which is outside Buffalo, New York. And it was during the time when he was trying to get the contract for the dam, the power station going into Buffalo, that he met this woman named Mina, who was his second wife. And Mina was anti-spiritualist because her father was the chief minister at the Chautauqua encampment, which I can't remember what religious denomination off the top of my head they were, but it was an encampment for religion. So when they fell in love, Mina said, "We can't get married unless you give up your spiritualist pursuits." So Thomas Edison feigned to give up his pursuits and continued on with his work. Thomas died in 1931, and he had a bout of illness. He was in a coma for a couple days. He woke up with his wife and his doctor in the room and simply said, "It's very beautiful over there," and he passed away peacefully. Shortly after he died, Dagobert Runes published the book, The Diary and Sundry Observations of Thomas Alva Edison. This book contained basically Edison's diary and a bunch of magazine and newspaper interviews that he had given. This book had 3 sections when it was first published. The first 2 sections were on life and invention, and the entire 3rd section was devoted to spiritualism. The fun part is when the book came out, the family threw a fit, and they demanded that the books be recalled and taken out of circulation, and many of them were. Lucky, I was able to stumble across one of the original books. The first one I bought only had the 2 sections, and the second one I bought had the 3rd section. And when you're trying to shop for these things, you don't know how many sections are going to be in there. They're really hard to find in the first place. So I photocopied the 3rd section in its entirety. It's available on the libraries of my sites, ITC Voices and paranormalstudy.com. I'm going to put up a couple quotes from Edison here to show how he was working to move forward spirit communication. This one right here basically says that he thinks that if he can develop a device that is so delicate that spirit can affect it, manipulate it, move it, if personality exists in the next life, that particular device should be able to record that manipulation. We can all agree with that. If you're going to prove spirit positive, you should be able to record it and examine it later on. He also thought that if spirit existed, it would retain memory, and that memory has attachments to the earth. And in the earth, and with its attachments to the earth, it would probably want to connect with the people it left behind. Now, all of these quotes and other information I have on a handout, and I gave Beth the link. Maybe she can put it in the notes of whatever streaming service you're watching. It's available on the Paranormal Study website, so you can download it. It's going to have all of the reference talking points for you for this talk. And finally, he said straight out that he was working on an apparatus to do this, to make sure he could, well, to attempt to communicate with the other side. And he was hoping that it would be made manifest within several months. And I put up the date on this one because it was American Magazine 1920. The reason I find this interesting is the previous 3 quotes all became concrete in 1920. This experiment in 1920 basically took a beam of light, shot it across a doorway, and there was a receiver on the other side. If the beam of light was interrupted in any way, shape, or form, the receiver would measure it. And you would be able to see that there was some force interrupting with a beam of light. This was the instrument that was delicate. He felt that bending light would be the easiest thing for them on the other side. So he got together a group of spiritualists and scientists in a room. The scientists examined the equipment, paid close attention to it, and the spiritualists tried to make the spirits manifest. Unfortunately, nothing happened. But this was published in 1933, 2 years after his death. And if you actually read the article itself, they kind of make fun of him of it on this particular topic, that it's just a fanciful topic. But I also note that they held off to 2 years after he died because I don't think they wanted to offend him while he was alive. When Edison died in 1932, a year later, the Society for Etheric Research, which incorporated out of Delaware, was a group of spiritualists. And they tried to contact Edison and several other spirits through transmediumship. The apparent spirit of Thomas Edison came through and drew this particular device that you see on the screen right now. It is basically a 4x4 wooden box with a microphone in it. You have an old spiritualist trumpet filled with potassium permanganate with a plug in the end. There are mic leads, so the microphone input comes to an aerial antenna and goes back out to the aerial antenna. And basically it creates an aluminum battery in the trumpet, and the reaction noise should be able to generate spirit communication. A little bit of noise to generate spirit communication. And we're going to harp on that a lot throughout the rest of this particular lecture. The interesting thing is a device similar to this led to the first EVP that was ever recorded. That EVP came through the work of Attila von SZALAY. Most of you have probably never heard of this man. He is buried in the pages of ITC history. He was a clairaudient medium, meaning he could hear the spirit world. He was also an avid photographer. He would try to photograph the spirit world interacting with ours. In 1941, he started experiments trying to communicate with spirit. He would play classical 78s, classical albums on 78s, which is the size of record, and through various classical music and lighting schemes, he would take photographs in hopes that spirit would communicate with him. He did not have much success. His success finally did come about 15 years later when he paired up with a man named Raymond BAYLESS. BAYLESS knew of SZALAY's mediumistic abilities, and BAYLESS thought that maybe we can record the voices intentionally from the other side. So they started with putting SZALAY in a spirit cabinet. Spirit cabinets were used in transmediumship, and they're still used today for the most part. Inside of the spirit box, of the spirit cabinet, they put a trumpet with a microphone, kind of like the device that Edison had, the etheric group had channeled from Edison. The microphone ran outside to a speaker at first, and SZALAY, when SZALAY was in the box, BAYLESS could hear some whispers through the speaker. But the record cutter they had was not capable of recording these whispers. So they upgraded their equipment, and they got a Pack-Bell record cutter. The Pack-Bell record cutter was much more sensitive. So what they did is they kept on with the experiment. And about a year later, the first EVP was recorded. Mr. von SZALAY, for the purpose of his particular experiment, sat in the cabinet alone for 15 minutes. Believing that nothing was forthcoming, he left the cabinet. We then played back the tape recording, expecting to hear nothing, but were surprised to hear a distinct voice say, "This is G." At this time, I was sitting on the outside of the cabinet listening to the highly amplified loudspeaker and heard absolutely nothing. He was listening to a very loud loudspeaker that was pumping out the sound from the cabinet. And then the record cutter was recording the sound from the loudspeaker. So he heard nothing from the loudspeaker, but the record cutter recorded the EVP. This is G. It's still my mission to try to find a copy of this EVP. The ASPR is kind of defunct at this point in time and have not responded to my emails in several years. So I don't know if we'll ever be able to find it, but this was written up in 1959, which was the year that changed everything for EVP. So this experiment itself was from 1957, and it took 2 years to get published. 1959 brought us into the modern era. So before we get into the modern era, there's a quote that I always like to lean on because it is fascinating when it comes to any form of audio ITC. It comes from a theosophist named Alice Bailey, who was channeling Tibetan Master DK in 1936. This quote becomes very important because it is a predictor of where we are today and how EVP became what it is in our paranormal society. Within the next few years, the fact of the eternity of existence will advance from the realm of questioning into the realm of certainty. Through the use of radio by those who have passed over, will communication be set up and reduced to a true science. Radio. So that's what we're going to be discussing here from now on. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got my cat is on the table with me here, crunching around on things. So you might hear a little crunching in the background. Friedrich Jürgenson is the man who brought EVP to the world. Yes, BAYLESS published about it in the ASPR, but it was a journalist for parapsychologists. Jürgenson, on the other hand, published it in a book for the world to read. He was kind of a Renaissance man. He was a Ukrainian-born opera singer, filmmaker, and he painted the portrait of several popes at the behest of the papacy. He was creating a documentary, and he needed bird songs for this particular documentary. So he went to his cabin in northern Sweden, went to the top floor, opened up his window, and stuck his microphone out the window to record the forest. At one point, he noticed his dog going crazy, running around in circles. So he had to stop the recording, and he played it back, and he heard something. It was a low, whispery voice in Norwegian talking about the difference between nocturnal and daytime bird songs. He was a very smart man. He went immediately to the various radio stations, calling them up, asking if they had any broadcasts on bird songs. And in Scandinavia in 1959, there weren't a lot of radio stations, so it was easy to get his answer. But he noted something. It didn't sound like a normal voice. It sounded like the wind carried it, like it was rustling on the leaves. There was that little noise in the background, that noise. And we're going to keep talking about that little noise in the background. So he tried again and again to recreate this particular event. Eventually, he got something that shocked him. It was his mother's voice in EVP form. It said, "Friedel, can you hear me? It's Mommy." And that changed everything for him. He realized that he was recording something. At this point, he wasn't sure if it was his own thoughts he was recording on tape or whether it was the actual voice of the deceased. He also ascribed the term polyglot to EVP communication. Jürgenson, like our other researcher we're going to be looking at here in a second, spoke several languages. Jürgenson, I believe, spoke 7, and he was getting full sentences made of these little pieces of audio snippets. So it could be from German and Swedish and Russian, all just locked together, different words from each one. And it creates a full sentence unto itself. And that became what is known as polyglot EVP recording. Over the course of his career, he recorded thousands of voices, some of which he believed were terrestrial, some of which he believed were alien. The voices told him to use radio, and he used frequencies 1445 to 1500. To this day in Europe, 1485 is often still referred to as the Jürgenson frequency. He published his results in a book in 1963 called Voices from Space. This book became the title of what EVP was known as. They were known as Voices from Space from 1963 onward. The word EVP had not been invented yet. Pope Paul VI was one of the popes that Jürgenson had painted. And after Jürgenson published on his Voices from Space, the Pope said that recording these voices was not heretical, that it was a mystery controlled by the divine provinces of God, and since the dead are in God's kingdom, they are under his power. And therefore, God is the one who has the ultimate say as to whether these voices can come through. So if you are a Catholic, you actually have a dispensation to record the dead, which is absolutely fascinating. And I'm convinced it's directly linked to Jürgenson's work. The image on the left that you'll see is one of the most famous video ITC images of all time. When Jürgenson died, one of his recording partners was not able to make it to his funeral. At the exact moment of his internment, he received a vocal message in his head that said, "Turn on the TV." Now, you all remember the old TVs from back in the day. When you turn them on or turn them off, they go down to a dot. What happened was he turned on the TV, that dot came forward from the backlit projection, and this image of Jürgenson appeared on the screen at the moment he was being interred. The photo was snapped, and it's become one of the most famous images in video ITC of all time. Now, we're not going to be able to play the EVP for you here. That's fine. Like I said, we will load it up so you can watch this whole presentation with the audio intact. But a great quote to lead out on with Jürgenson is that I discovered the simple truth that the biggest difficulties and obstacles are to be found within ourselves, and that without their removal, the attempted approaches by the invisible dimension of life could not be realized and would instead inevitably lead to misunderstandings. So what he found was that if we are dedicating ourselves to spirit communication, we will have more luck than if we ignore the attempted approaches from the other side. We need to be open to them in order to record. And this is an early observation, and it kind of still holds true today. Now, our next researcher is Konstantin RAUDIVE. RAUDIVE was trained under Carl Jung, and he was at the end of his career when he picked up a book called the book Voices from Space. It absolutely fascinated him. I like to think that Jung, being a psychologist, picked up this book about a guy who was pretty well known throughout Europe, who said he could record the dead and play it back for people to hear. If I were someone inclined to investigate the mental state of certain beings, of certain people back in the day, I would imagine that this could be a new thing to add to the DSM. It would be something that would be wonderful to explore. So the first thing he did is contact Jürgenson and set up an interview with him. So he traveled up to Sweden, stayed with Jürgenson, learned his techniques, and recorded voices, and was blown away. So what he did is he brought these techniques back to Germany, and he brought in his learned colleagues. He brought in doctoral candidates. He worked with physicists and audiologists. He worked with electric engineers. He brought in scientists to observe what he was doing. And he garnered such a reputation that he was invited to Pi Studios to record EVP. So what he did is at Pi Studios, which is a studio that's insulated against stray radio, it absolutely needs to be if you're recording delicate audio. They set up 4 recorders, recorded for 27 minutes, and recorded over 200 distinct voices in a controlled environment. Over the course of his EVP recording, he recorded over 72,000 voices, everything from friends and relatives to apparent major names from the past that are well known, like Hitler and others who apparently came through. So Konstantin, he published this book in 1971. The book is called Breakthrough. This is the book that changed everything for our world of EVP. The reason is because Colin Smythe picked it up when it was published in German and realized there was a whole market for this that wasn't getting tuned in to these voices from space. This book was published in German originally. There was Jürgenson's book in Swedish. So Colin Smythe said, let's publish this book in English. And it brought EVP to the English-speaking world, which basically is the reason most of us are all here today. It's because of this book. In this book, he outlined 4 different methods of recording. One where he had a microphone, one where he hooked up a radio burble with a microphone. He had a frequency transmitter, which you'll hear in the EVP when you watch the full version with audio. And he also created an experimental device called the RAUDIVE diode, which ultimately led to the creation of the Ghost Box in 2002, but that is beyond the scope of this lecture at the moment. When this book came out, they were called microphone voices or RAUDIVE voices based upon his work on there. And shortly afterwards, Colin Smythe, the publisher, realized that maybe they needed a more overarching, more encompassing term, and the term EVP, electronic voice phenomena, was finally made manifest. And it's because of this particular book. Now, the interesting thing on RAUDIVE is he observed several different characteristics. He realized that the voice entities speak very rapidly, sometimes in polyglot, like Jürgenson was describing, sometimes as many as 5 or 6 languages in a single sentence. They spoke in a definite rhythm, which was forced upon them by the means that they employed. The rhythmic mode sometimes was shortened phrases, telegram-style phrase, which means as few words as possible, or a shortened sentence. And because of these restrictions on the way that they were speaking, a lot of the grammatical rules, such as subject, object, verb relationships, were completely moved around. It was interesting, and because of this, neologisms, new words, new phrases were often found in EVP recordings. His work also included microphone classifications, which is very similar to the classification scale we use today. Group A through Group C, basically it goes from the best communication that you can get to the least communications with the least efficacy. Now, we'll go into more of those later because a lot of what we do with classifications comes from Sarah ESTEP. Sarah ESTEP, as a young girl, grew up in a funeral parlor. And because of this, she was surrounded by death and always had to wonder about whether there was some life after death, but she never experienced it. In the mid-70s, she picked up a book called The Handbook of Psi Discoveries by Ostrander and Schroeder. And in this book, one chapter was dedicated to EVP, and another chapter was dedicated completely to Konstantin RAUDIVE. So she went out and found RAUDIVE's breakthrough book and read through it, got his techniques, looked at the analysis of EVPs and how he was recording them. So she decided to do an EVP experiment for 1 week. For the first 5 days, she asked the question, is there anybody there? She asked this 5 times. Nothing happened. But on the 6th day, she changed it up and asked the question, please tell me, what is your world like? And she got a single response. That response was beauty. And that changed everything for her, because growing up in a funeral parlor, she questioned life after death, but now she had the possible evidence that life after death really does exist. So she continued her research. She began to record religiously and ultimately founded the American Association of EVP in 1982. The AAEVP became the largest group of EVP researchers in the world. And she helped found and organize the first EVP conferences in the world. The reason we are here today talking about paranormal EVPs is because of the work of Sarah ESTEP, RAUDIVE, and JÜRGENSON. And Sarah's influence on the world of EVP recording cannot be overstated enough. She helped organize the first quarterly news journal on EVP, and she continued over the years and handed it over to Tom and Lisa Butler in 2000 when she retired. And Tom and Lisa rebranded it, the AAEVP, to Association Transcommunication, which is still in existence today, but the newsletter no longer is. Over the course of her career, she wrote 2 books and recorded thousands of EVPs. Well, obviously, we're not going to be able to play the 3 EVPs for you here. That's going to be an ongoing thing. The 2 books, though, Voices of Eternity and Road to Eternity, are generally available if you're interested. And if on the Paranormal Study library page, we have a PDF copy of Roads to Eternity for you to read if you can't find a physical copy for you. I also have the CD that accompanies that particular book, and I'll try to upload that sometime within the next day or 2 so you can reference that with the book should you choose to download it. Now, Sarah brought us the EVP classification scale. This is the classification scale that we use today. So if somebody tells you that they've recorded a Class A EVP, this is what they're referencing, that the voices can be heard and understood over a speaker by most anyone. The average listener will hear what you expect them to hear without prompting. This, unfortunately, does not mean loud EVPs are Class A. You can have EVPs that are absolute garbage. So loud does not, clarity does. Class B also has some clarity. It can be heard over a speaker, but not everyone's going to hear the same thing. But the average person should be able to hear it without prompting. And Class C, which is something we need to address, only because you can only hear it in headphones. Someone who is not trained with EVP will not be able on their own generally. And because of that, we, as researchers, we need to address how we are portraying our evidence. If we're putting Class C EVP out there, it's really muddying the waters. If you're not helping to educate the layman on EVP, then it's really not doing the good work. So I recommend that you keep your Class C EVP and not put them up on YouTube. Don't put them on your websites. We can all record Class A and Class B EVPs. That's what the world needs to hear. And that's what you will hear when you finally hear it with the audio, will be Class A for you to listen to. Now, these are some EVPs that I recorded. Obviously, we're just going to skip through these real quick. Now, let's finish this up by talking about EVP theory. There are a few different theories that are in use today on how EVP is formulated. The first is the psychokinesis theory. The PK theory basically states that consciousness from living people can affect radio, can affect recording media. This has been reported by ITC researchers like Sonia Rinaldi, who is a very active Brazilian researcher, Sarah ESTEP, and the Butlers, who've already been mentioned, Ernst Sinkowski, who is the father of ITC, and myself. The clip that I have here is a clip where you will hear a consciousness imprint upon a radio. The lady was sitting right next to, and her voice comes through a radio, and then she speaks right after her directly after that talking. So there's a perfect A-B comparison of this. Absolutely fascinating when you get to hear it. Now, it's also been found that consciousness can imprint upon media via both the sleep state and the awake state. I have recorded on several occasions people's voices known to me coming through my ghost boxes, and the clip that's referenced here, that came through in an awake state because the woman was sitting right next to me. There's also the transformation hypothesis. This is one of the most popular theories of EVP. It's where background noise is transformed into EVP. So a floorboard creak, a pop in the wall, a knock. If you look at these things on a waveform and you pay really close attention, or spike or whatever, you'll often hear syllables intertwined with that little noise. It's like the noise in the room allows for the communication to occur. Now, whether these pops, knocks, and spikes are actually coming in from the other side or whether they're just ambient noises in the room, you've got to pay attention to that. Like if the door closes, you may hear a whispered EVP in the noise after the sound of the door closing. We found that most EVP is in the range of 400 to 4 kilohertz. This is the standard range where you'll find EVP, but you'll find a lot of frequencies missing quite frequently, unless it's a breakthrough communication. That's a classification scale that I've applied to ghost box communication. There are several different classifications of the type of communication that comes through. Breakthrough is like a class A, where it's speaking, just like I'm speaking to you right now. It's very uncommon in ghost box, but it's quite common in EVP if you've got somebody who's talented as an EVP practitioner. Now, the theory between transformation hypothesis is stochastic resonance. Stochastic resonance is a well-known theory where you have a carrier wave, and when like frequencies match with a carrier wave, it becomes much louder. I often liken this to a bumblebee. Anybody who's seen my lectures has heard this before. But a bumblebee, you can hear it bumbling around your face from a meter or so away. You can hear its little wings beating and the little hum that comes with it. But if you look at a hive, for example, a beehive, you can hear it from meters away, dozen meters away, easy, you can hear that buzzing. Now think about it. All of these little bumblebee wings are flapping, and they're relatively all the same volume. But when they all flap together and it meshes with the carrier waves of nature, all of a sudden it becomes so much louder, and you can hear it from so much farther away. It's like a soloist in a choir. A soloist gets up there and sings without a microphone. The choir comes in behind. Vibration is a carrier wave. All of a sudden, it all becomes so much louder with the doubling effect. Now, when it comes to background noise in EVP, think about it. If we have background noise, if we've got radio static, or we've got pops and spikes and constant noise like a fan or a hum of an AC in the background, when is being transmitted from the other side meshes up with these frequencies in the ambient atmosphere. Where those frequencies match, it's going to become much louder. That is the idea. When they mesh, they become louder, they transform into EVP. And finally, random selection. We found that psi can be imprinted from the communicator, be it living or dead, onto bytes via imprinting onto digital bits. It's not just analog tape. We found that applications like Echovox or Obelisk or EVP Maker can be manipulated from the other side. Now, what's very interesting about this is most people think you have to have a microphone and a recorder. So the microphone picks up the spirit world and it transduces it through the recorder itself, and it winds up getting recorded onto the medium. So backing up, speaking of which, being necessary for recording EVP. So what happens when you have no noise? You're in a virtually silent room. Well, if you're using a digital recorder today, guess what? You've got noise. Your digital recorder, which is digital bits, like we have on the screen now, your digital recorder is made up of integrated circuits. Integrated circuits are not clean. They're noisy. You've heard computer noise before. You've heard cell phone noise before. But with your recorders, they're designed to be clean. So what they do is they have a frequency roll-off on the recording so you can't hear it, but the noise is still there. And it's often postulated that that is the noise that's being manipulated on your recorder itself for you to record EVP. Now, there was really active in the field. He's an advanced age, but he's still around. His name's Alexander McCrae. And he published in the Journal of the SPR that he was able to use a Faraday cage. It was either Oxford or Cambridge. And what he did is he removed the microphone apparatus from his recorder. Guess what? He recorded EVP on the media without a microphone, nothing to transduce the sound. That shit, however spirit is communicating with us, they can directly influence our media without having to have the sound transduced through a microphone. When you think about that and blow it up, that means that they can use most anything that we can to communicate with us. If you look at one of the earliest sites for EVP on the web, it was called Coffee Pot Ghost. It was put up by a lady named Charlie. And what she did is she recorded her coffee percolator every day and invariably got EVP. That's one of the things that I want to stress to you is when you open up yourself to communicating with the other side, when you dedicate yourself to a very specific mechanism for recording EVP or any form of ITC, chances are you are going to meet with success. This is something that has been found over and over and over again. When you put your energy towards recording a certain methodology, that methodology will often come to fruition. So if you're out there practicing a form of ITC or recording of any type, stick to dedicated, be like Sarah and Konstantin and Friedrich and record every day. And chances are you're going to get something. And I want to leave you with this. Why do we want to practice EVP? Why should any person want to meet through a tape recorder beings not existing in the physical plane? Knowing that the soul, the I in consciousness, is indestructible gives us a deeper appreciation for all life. Since we will carry our essence over into the world beyond death, perhaps we will learn to live more fully, to open ourselves to our earth plane life. There's comfort in knowing we survive death, but survival, unless based upon what is virtuous, is an empty victory. This is really important, especially today where most of us are locked down in our houses. And we're not supposed to go out and talk to other people. It's a good time to examine what we're going through. Researchers, I'm sure a lot of you possibly believe that there's life after death. Supporting EVP, you're inviting in people from where they don't exist in our physical plane, but we want to communicate with them. When they do communicate, audio in this particular presentation that shows that they can communicate. It shows us that there is life after death, that this that we're in right now is temporary. It's not something that we're locked into. And when we can realize that, we live a better life. We can focus on things that are past our regular existence. We can focus on educating other people to show them that there is life after death, that there's more than just social media gripes and whatever, and your politicians. What we can focus on is the more virtuous life. And in the time of COVID-19, it's a great time to re-examine this fact. We're all in this together. We are all looking at our life right now, questioning whether mortality is knocking on our door. But we need to know that there is something past this life. And we're not sure what that is, but we do know that it can come back and communicate with us. And I'd like to leave you with that particular thought. And due to the interruption of the audio for the first 10 minutes or so, our question and answer session may be truncated. I'm not quite sure.
No,
what do you want to do, Beth?
About 5 minutes. So, yeah, why not?
Okay.
That was fantastic. Sorry about the audio. It was like, the point of this was because
life happens.
It could be extraterrestrial, poltergeist, it could be anything at this rate. Thank you so much. That was so good. Fantastic information. And there's a couple of it's we've got a couple of comments that came through obviously while you were doing that. One person said the one that makes me skeptical is when polyglot, which is double language voices, are accepted. Why would in Franglish or interested in Tim's views about this?
Well, that's one of the interesting things. What it's been noted before is if, let's say, an American researcher goes to Germany and is in a castle, they record EVP, invariably, guess what the EVP is going to be in? It's in a language that the person understands. When I do ghost box communication, I speak a smattering of French. I often get a blend of English and French. It happens. So I don't know why polyglot happens, but what you can actually, when you actually look at Breakthrough, RAUDIVE will look at his EVPs and he will show you all of the different syllables or words and translate them, and it creates an entire sentence. Somehow it's whatever mechanism is easiest for those on the other side to communicate, and sometimes it's in several different languages.
That's fascinating. Also, Jenny has, so could it be that intention can be utilized by spirit over above radio waves or white noise?
Absolutely. White noise is the foundation of EVP. Through the use of radio, will spirit be made manifest? And basically, they are broadcasting to us all the time. Sometimes mediums can pick it up. Sometimes you can hear it as the voice in your head. Other times when you have physical mechanisms, which we were discussing today, such as EVP or ghost box, that is when the intention, whatever energy they're sending out can be made manifest to the point where we can hear it with our ears.
That's a great question. Great question. Someone had said that they had used the spelling is D-I-O-D-E. I've not heard of it.
Yeah, diode.
Diode recorder. They said they haven't had any results. Yes, that was a bit more of a common. What you could explain a little bit more about what that particular device is?
Yes, so the RAUDIVE diode is based upon white noise and an aerial. The diode was created with a physicist friend of his. I can't remember the name of his friend. But it was an experimental phase when breakthrough had come through, and he had recorded positive EVP. Basically, what it was is there was an antenna that was connected to a germanium diode. It's called a cat's whisker, and what it does is it basically creates a little burst of AM white noise. And that white noise would be carried down into the recorder, and a microphone would be hooked up and running over the white noise, and that would help to facilitate EVP. That particular diode ultimately led to ghost box formulation via Frank Sumption, but that's a different lecture entirely. And the diode has been used off and on since the book was published in 1971 with varying results. There are still several people who make commercial iterations of the diode available today, but it's also very simple to make. On ITC Voices, if you just go to the website and type in the word diode, you will have all the schematics, diagrams, and photos of various professional units for you to check out and make one yourself.
Awesome, awesome. And from that, Tim's actually got a handout that you'll see coming across your screen at the moment. That's the link to get to it, which actually coincides with this fantastic talk. Also, while you're writing that down as it scrolls across, Jenny also has another question. Have you had a session when you play it backwards and you get full words and sentences?
All the time. And two classifications of EVP that I did not include because they're not historically accurate are two that I'm lobbying to get included: EVP-R and EVP-X. EVP-X being electronic devices such as Ovilus, EVP Maker, Echovox, Ghost Boxes. EVP-X would be like an EVP-XA, EVP-XB, EVP-XC. Same with EVP-R, which is recordings that are obviously reversed. I've received so many of them. And the interesting thing is when you listen to an EVP or an EVP-X and it sounds off, just there's something weird about the intonation, that's when you want to reverse it. And often you'll have a message forward and backward that interplay with each other. A very brief example, I was called in to do an investigation at a place here in Michigan. We were in a location where the phone kept ringing at a certain time during the day. They had called out techs, and the techs could figure out nothing. They pick up the line, there'd be no one there. So I went and I particularly inquired about this line, and I asked, who's making the phone calls? Are you trying to reach the party line? Because when this place was active, it was back in the days of TT cables and operators coming through, and you had a party line. And there was an EVP that came forward, and I can't remember what the forward EVP was, but when I reversed it, oh yeah, forward it was, you can reach us at, which was a direct answer to the party line. But then I reversed it because it sounded weird, and it said must have been Thorpe. I was like, what the heck is that? So the lady who called us in met with me at the public reveal that I did, because it was at a historical village. And she came up to me. The historical village has shops in it. She came up to me afterwards and said, I really got to tell you about Thorpe. And I said, what? Said this old lady came into my location. She said she used to live in that building, and their name was Thorpe. Her father ran the building. And that was from EVP Reverse.
Wow, wow. We got another question from Kerry. She says, how do you guard against deal with the audio pareidolia?
That's a fun one because it is the bane of existence. Basically, the only way you can do it is to train yourself to the best ability that you can. You've got to be able to realize what stray radio signal is. You've got to be able to realize that it's somebody whispering in your room if it's an EVP. And the only way to do that is to control your environment. If you're doing an EVP session, what I highly recommend is that you have cameras all around the room so you can capture what everybody is doing in the room. So if you see someone's mouth move, you know that, an inhale could instantly become a high on a recorder that's 5 feet away. And you would never, ever catch that unless you had someone on video to see it. With radio ITC, it's way more difficult. but there are different things I've laid out over the years, different theories on how to do this. And we mainly look for meaningful communication, where you answer a question and you get a direct response to your question. Or you get something that is just jumping right out at you as a communication. Like, I can turn on a ghost box and the first words out of it are, "Hi, Tim." I know that's not going to happen. Or my last name, or even my family nickname when it comes through. These are one of my favorite things. I do a lecture at the University of Michigan every year around Halloween. And at the end of the lecture, I know the professor who puts it on very well. I will walk around with either a ghost box or echo box in front of her class, and I will point to her and say, "What is her name?" Invariably, every year, the professor's first name comes out within 10 seconds.
Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive. Oh, well, I think we're going to wrap it up there and let you have the rest of your day. I've been so sorry about the tech difficulties, but yeah,
no problem at all.
and that's awesome. And there's some fantastic information there. Guys, check out Tim's website, ITC Voices. Also, there's the link down the bottom there. So you can watch the replay of this to actually get to the link if you need to make a note of it. Again, thank you so much for giving up your time for this, and also supporting PIVC 2020 on behalf of those charities dealing with COVID-19. Thank you so much. Do take care.
It was so much fun.
Thank you.